Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. Today I have with me McKenzie Denton KO4GLN. This has been a long time in the making. I've been trying to fit into Mackenzie's very busy schedule. She's a junior at Old Dominion University, but she has a very interesting and busy ham radio background. She's only been in the hobby for 4 years, and she can correct me if that's not quite right, but she has achieved her extra class license. She's been very involved with the Williamsburg Area Radio Club, Amateur Radio Club. She reinvigorated the Old Dominion University Amateur Radio Club, which she'll get into in a second. She has been a volunteer examiner. She's a pre-med student when she's not studying and leading ham radio. She does operate contests, RIDI, WinLink. I read just recently that she's building equipment. Mackenzie's a very busy person and definitely a shining star in ham radio. Mackenzie, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's back up 4 years, I think 2020. Why did you decide to get your ham radio license, and what was the process that you went through?
Oh man. Well, so it all started back in March 2020, right when the pandemic put us into a lockdown. I was 15 years old, and like many others, I was stuck at home, disconnected from friends and family members. So I told my parents that I was feeling very isolated and anxious because of all of this, and they challenged me to channel my emotions to something positive. I wanted to find a hobby that would be fun and educating so that I could keep my mind kind of stimulated when my classes would end, and especially on the weekends when I had nothing else to do. So my dad handed me this nice stack of old Popular Mechanics magazines, and I would go through them pretty much every single day. Eventually, I found one about astronaut Owen Garriott, his call sign Whiskey 5 Lima Foxtrot Lima. He was the first person to operate an amateur radio station from space, and he did this aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia in 1983. He was able to make a lot of contacts with people back on Earth. So after discovering this, I went to YouTube immediately, and I watched all kinds of videos of amateur radio operators and the people contacting like satellites, doing just satellite work in their backyard, etc. So after watching these videos, the next day I went through my dad's collection and I found an old Radio Shack HTX 202 VHF transceiver to experiment with. So I powered it up with some batteries, and I figured out how to program the frequencies after some very much extensive Googling, and I downloaded this app to track the ISS. I stood in my backyard for about a month, hoping to hear something, but I never did. But regardless of the lack of progress, I did not give up, and I developed a deep desire to learn more about the hobby from this. So that's kind of how I, got started in ham radio.
So was your dad a ham radio operator?
He is.
Is he active?
He is, yes. But, recently he's been pretty busy with other things. But when I found out, about ham radio through this magazine, he didn't really talk to me much about it, and I honestly forgot that he was doing it because he was so busy with other things. And, back then he wasn't really like operating as much, and I wouldn't be in the garage as much because I'd be in this room on Zoom all the time. So he had this collection of old radios, and he let me go through them and kind of figure it out myself. So that was pretty exciting.
So I understand COVID and lockdown and wanting to find something to kind of put your passion toward. When COVID ended and the lockdowns ended, you remained passionate about it. What was it about ham radio at that point that kept you engaged?
Well, at that point, I met this group of people at, like you were saying, at the Williamsburg Area Amateur Radio Club. Going into it before I got licensed, I was very scared, and because I was a aspiring pre-med student at the time, I didn't really see how amateur radio kind of tied into what I wanted to do with the future. But those people at that club really kept me engaged. They were like, hey, try this. Let me show you how this can tie into medicine for you. For example, when I was, I think it was my senior year of high school, I was trying to get licensed as an EMT because that's kind of like a stepping stone to going to medical school. And of course, this is way down the line, but there's people in the club who I had grown really close to who helped me kind of stay confident about this process of like getting licensed as an EMT. They gave me scenarios. They showed me how amateur radio was relevant to emergency preparedness. They told me that a lot of paramedics and EMTs were actually amateur radio operators. So even like that like realm of amateur radio, it was very interesting to me because like I was saying, I didn't really see how engineering tied into medicine, but eventually I became very comfortable with these people, and they helped me find my place in the hobby.
So I find it fascinating that two things you've mentioned. YouTube right away was something that was educating you on ham radio, and then a very active club. And I hear often two sides of that coin, where clubs maybe aren't as welcoming or as active, and then others that really encourage people to get involved with the hobby, as well as maybe expand their presence in the hobby. So I want to get back to that. You got licensed in 2020, but then you very quickly upgraded to general and extra class. So clearly you were pretty passionate about it. Was it just this desire to have more bandwidth?
I got an extra class because I really wanted to take advantage of all these amazing opportunities that amateur radio has to offer. You know, you can only do so much with a technician license. There's more you can do with a general, but really having that extra license opens up so many more doors for you.
So McKenzie, I'm also really intrigued by the leadership role you've taken, and you've done this at multiple levels. I think at the Williamsburg Club, obviously at your university at Old Dominion, very involved with the ARRL. What was it about leadership that attracted you? Was this something you were always sort of geared toward?
Leadership in ham radio has really been crucial to my personal growth, and it has allowed me to give back to this community in some ways. I've learned that leadership is more about fostering an environment where people feel valued, supported, and capable of achieving anything. I had the privilege of serving I still do have the privilege of serving as the Virginia Section Youth Coordinator, where I have been promoting youth involvement through events and different club collaborations. And I'm also the founder and president of the ODU Amateur Radio Club, which has enabled me to introduce amateur radio to college students who were unaware of the fun that they were missing out on. And, you know, just besides ham leadership positions, I served as an organizer for community service events such as food drives, toy drives, and like different charity fundraisers throughout high school and leading up to college. I also became a CPR instructor to teach members of my community life-saving skills. So I have always been really interested in leadership. I know it's very important when going into medical school, and I just wanted to be somebody who was able to support and lead people in the future.
And McKenzie, do you think you're going to hang on to this passion for ham radio? I do hear from a lot of people, and I was one of them. I was licensed when I was in high school and somewhat active through my first year in college, but then my career, family, travels sort of got in the way. Do you think that you'll remain active? I mean, you've got a very busy schedule now, but as a pre-med student, things are just going to get worse for you.
Absolutely. I really am. I feel strongly about this. I really want to keep with this hobby. I know a lot of people are worried about it potentially dying off because they don't see younger people caring about this hobby more, because I guess there's an idea that young people think, oh, we can just use our phones for that, or it's kind of outdated. But I've never seen it that way. I've made some amazing friendships in this hobby. For example, I was actually able to shadow in an emergency room just by knowing somebody who was a ham radio operator. And if you know anything about pre-med students, that's very hard to shadow in the emergency room. Because they do not really want somebody there who's not very experienced, because it's dangerous sometimes. And, you know, specifically for me, I want to go into emergency medicine. So that was a huge opportunity for me. I was extremely excited and thankful that I was able to find somebody who could help me. So I have a lot still to give back to this community, and nothing is going to change when I get to medical school. I might get busy. I am busy now, but I might get busier. But of course, when I have free time and I'm not studying, I definitely will get on the air sometimes, or maybe even encourage some of my friends at medical school to check out amateur radio.
So tell me more about that. I appreciate why you've chosen to do it, but obviously you're building a club at Old Dominion, and you've brought additional people into the club, and you're encouraging people to get their licenses. What's the pitch you use when you talk to somebody who is not currently a ham radio operator? How do you pitch to them and sell them on this great hobby that we both enjoy?
Oh, man. So I want to go back to the Boy Scouts for a second, because some of them are not very familiar with amateur radio. So specifically for the Boy Scouts, most of them are very open to trying new things. And that's already a great start for me. They have a natural curiosity about them. I find it very successful when you are extremely patient with them. If, let's say, I'm doing a contact demonstration on HF, I do my best to avoid constantly calling out to one operator so the scout doesn't really get bored and they stay engaged. I also make sure to praise them when they are able to get through to an op, because I just see how happy it makes them. They're able to do it themselves and they just feel very happy about it. And also just guiding them rather than doing every single thing for them. Let them change a frequency or tune the radio themselves. Let them hold the mic and talk. You can tell them what to say, and I even encourage people to write it out for them so they can read it off paper if they start to panic or lose their train of thought. But as for people at college, I always ask them if they would be interested in talking to an astronaut on the ISS from their home. And of course they always say, oh my gosh, yes, I didn't know you could do that. And I didn't know either until I read that article. So, that method has never really let me down.
You must hear some pushback, though, when you're having these conversations. When you have somebody say, why? I've got an iPhone, I have access to the internet. What's your response to them?
Oh yeah, I hear that all the time. And with the recent catastrophe with Hurricane Helene, let's use Asheville, North Carolina for an example. I always bring up, hey, what's going to happen if we don't have cell service and we get hit by a massive tornado or a massive hurricane? Those people in Asheville, like I was saying, they don't have cell service and they got separated from their families. But as somebody who is an amateur radio operator, we don't rely on the internet. We don't need our phones. We can get on the radio. We can try to find somebody who is nearby. We can help these families out by connecting with their loved ones who may have gotten swept to a completely other side of Asheville. Like if you set up a station in this part of Asheville and have your friend who is an operator in this side, there is a chance that they could connect each other again. And you would be doing so much by providing relief to that family just by letting them know that their family member is okay. And there's a lot of other fun aspects to amateur radio as well. Like there's contesting, there's fox hunting. There's even like a game aspect. I know they're trying to bring kind of a video game portion into amateur radio to keep people engaged. But, in my opinion, I think that we shouldn't rely on our phones all the time. And that's why I see amateur radio as so important. And I feel like other people should too.
So, McKenzie, there's so many things I want to dig deeper on, and I'm going to select a couple. And one is the Old Dominion University Amateur Radio Club, which I think the story was that you were looking for a college or university that had some sort of ham radio station, but then lo and behold, there really wasn't an official club. And I think you found this out after the fact. Tell me about that process of rejuvenating or getting an actual club started on campus.
When I was looking up colleges, I saw that Old Dominion University apparently had an old radio club. I guess I don't remember the exact date, but it was pretty old, and I assumed it was still there. So when I ended up going there, it was ran by a couple of students, but it was not an official club yet. It was not documented with Old Dominion. So I quickly joined, and I was able to get the paperwork filled out and everything for that with the club, and I made it official back in January 2023. And ever since then, I tried to convince some of my friends to join, and they did because they wanted to support me. And eventually they were able to fall in love with the hobby and get licensed as well. I even went as far as collaborating with the IEEE club at my school because, they were already interested in a lot of electronics and physics. So I convinced them to join my club as well. And we actually were able to get 4 people of the IEEE club licensed, and they're actually studying right now to upgrade to general. A couple more people joined, and they were already licensed. They didn't know we had a club, but they told me that they saw my posters and were very excited about it. We even have our own club station, and I've been trying to get people to be interested in contesting because that was something that I was extremely passionate about when starting this club, and I still am, but of course I can't really contest much anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, something that started out as almost nothing turned into a huge deal for me. There's been a lot of support with this club. I think we have about 12 total people who show up to every meeting, maybe about 8 people who are fully licensed. I know one person has their extra, and we're always talking. They always show up to events to support me, and it's been a crazy ride, but I'm very grateful for all of it, really.
So the other thing I'm interested in is your ARRL experience. You're the youth coordinator for Virginia, I believe. Tell me about that. How did you get involved with that, and what is that like? What does that entail, being the youth coordinator?
So the ways that I got into this is very funny to me because I went to a swap meet one day, and I'm a part of another club called the Chesapeake Amateur Radio Service, and I was at this swap meet, meeting some of the people from that club, and the president introduced me to the assistant section manager there. And I had talked to him, and he said, "Oh, it's very nice to meet you. I've heard about you." And I said, "You have? I've heard about you too." So, we kind of connected there for a little bit, and we had some good conversations. And he invited me to join this Zoom meeting that it's called the Go to for Life meeting. And basically what it is, it's an initiative to get young people back on the air. And after hearing some of my comments at that meeting, he asked me if I would be interested in becoming the section youth coordinator. And I said, "What? Of course, I'm not very experienced, but I would love to help in any way I can. So he appointed me as that, and my role is to promote youth involvement through events, on-air activities, and collaborations with clubs. It's also to mentor young operators and actually introduce them to these STEM-focused aspects of amateur radio. In fact, something that I worked on recently was connecting amateur radio clubs in different parts of Virginia to local scout troops in order to maximize the participation of JOTA, or Jamboree on the air. And it was a challenge, but hearing all of the scouting stations on the air this year and all of the positive feedback that I received after the event was over really made it all worth it. So I'm very proud that I gained this role as a section youth coordinator, and I'm very humbled to have been appointed, because it's truly amazing. Like, all of these young people that are interested in this hobby, you don't see it unless you actually go out there and you give them the time of day, and you don't give up when they're kind of hesitant at first because of mic fright. There's a lot of young people who are really interested in this stuff. You just have to be patient with them and really listen.
So, McKenzie, you mentioned contesting, and that you do have a passion for contesting. It sounds like you don't have as much time. Have you participated in any contests lately?
Not lately, no, unfortunately.
Have you had the opportunity to go to any contest stations?
I have not, actually.
Well, we'll just put an open call out there right now. I know some people that invite youth operators for various contests, so hopefully they'll be watching this and pay attention. One of the questions I have for you, we've talked about a lot about youth and how you pitch them and get them engaged. What would be your best advice for older people in the hobby? People maybe more my age that have been in the hobby for a long time. What could they do differently to help keep the hobby alive?
This is a great question. So I think one of the main reasons that younger people are hesitant to get involved is because they are unaware of the relevance of amateur radio in modern times, or they have this idea in their head that ham radio is just a bunch of guys sitting at a radio for 12 hours talking to strangers. But to get younger people involved, I think we need to showcase relevance and emphasize amateur radio's role in emergencies, science, and even like how it can be a stepping stone for different careers. There are so many ways to make amateur radio more fun for younger people, like possibly finding ways to gamify the amateur radio experience. For example, if there was some type of VR experience, because that's very popular with people my age, VR, if there was a way to make a VR experience where you could visualize signals traveling through space from your amateur radio station to another amateur radio station, I think that would be very interesting for some people. Or if you could earn digital badges for contacting satellite stations or even mastering digital modes. You could also collaborate with schools and work with educators to include amateur radio in some of their lessons, and maybe see how it ties into students' lives in general. And also engage on platforms where youth are active, like Instagram or Discord or even Facebook or Reddit. Also, there are some younger women who may not be interested in this hobby because it is male-dominated, but there are a lot of women who are involved in amateur radio nowadays. You'd be surprised. For example, the past president of the Williamsburg Area Amateur Radio Club, Toby Pappas, her call sign is Kilo Lima 0SS, or KL0SS. She did a great job in bringing in a lot of women into our club, and our current president, Carrie Hoffrith, NH2A, has made it a point to try and work on organizing more efforts to bring in youth, not only to our club, but to the hobby in general. I also, for the last point I really want to make here, is that I think it's important for hams, experienced hams, not to get frustrated with the younger people if they don't get it after a few times. I bring this up mainly because this is something that I've experienced when I was pretty new to the hobby. the immense amount of information that they have learned over the years as a ham radio operator came with trial and error, and I'm sure plenty of studying every day. So I think it really helps to remember that when you are working with somebody who has never operated a radio before or is struggling with phonetics or call signs, being very kind and patient with them can go a very long way.
So McKenzie, I'm going to pose a hypothetical to you. But before I do, clearly you're a natural-born leader. I love the way you present so confidently. But let's say that you were CEO of ARRL for a week. What would you do?
Oh my gosh. That is a loaded question. I think I would put in more effort to actually making it so that we can integrate ham radio into schools, because I think if you start early, then you can really foster an interest. I feel as though it's kind of late once people get into high school and college because they know what they want to do with their lives and finals are coming around. And especially in high school, you have that SAT that you have to take to actually get into college. So people are more worried about, their future and everything rather than hobbies. And maybe, let's say, ninth grade, people are worried about sports and getting volunteering hours in. So the thing that I would do is maybe, like I said, try to integrate amateur radio into maybe elementary schools and even early in the years of middle school, and show them how it's really relevant to their lives. And I think it would be important to emphasize the emergency side of amateur radio, and maybe show them the types of careers that are involved in amateur radio, how successful you can be, and maybe even the networking that comes with it.
So one of the topics that comes up often in my conversations, we're obviously talking about youth, and we're talking about kind of an older generation that have been in the hobby for a long time, but they often bring up this vast middle, a group of people, ham radio operators, licensed ham radio operators, that may be from 30 years old to 50 years old, but they're not active, or they're not very active. What would you do to get that group that already have their license? What would you do as the ARRL CEO to get them on the air more often?
Well, I would first try to find out why they stopped being so active in the first place, and if it was because they just didn't find an interest in it, or it was becoming too expensive, or they just didn't really have any friends anymore. I would try to see if I can maybe make a program specifically for those people, where those exact people in that group can try to meet and mingle. Maybe announce more swap meets in the area. You never know what kind of ham radio operators are near you in your neighborhood. You might even have a neighbor who's a ham radio operator who is inactive but doesn't know it. And if you're active and they're not active, you as an active operator can go over there and maybe invite them and encourage them to join your club and make them feel very welcome. I'm not sure exactly the reasons why people would not be active anymore, because I feel like as you get older, you become more experienced with amateur radio, and amateur radio is not static either. There's something that's always going on. There's something that's always improving. So to me, it's a very, very exciting hobby. There's lots of opportunities to do something new, especially with the digital modes, like operating digital modes. There's something always going on with that too. And there's always contests going on. There's always opportunities to get awards, But I guess there comes a time when you do have all the awards and you have worked all the modes and you have, worked all the bands. But I would say try to make more friends, try to see how it can relate to your life. Stay up with, I guess, the new technology, and be prepared during emergencies. I want to bring in Asheville again. They didn't know that was going to happen to them. They didn't know that, their lives would change in an instant. And that could happen to anybody. That could happen to us here in Virginia. But, knowing how your equipment works still and making sure that it's actually able to work and you can use it correctly goes a long way. And I think that should influence people. You have the opportunity to save somebody or change somebody's life when we're talking about emergency preparedness.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to mention to the audience, or topics that we haven't covered?
I would like to talk a little bit about where I see the future of ham radio going. In order to keep the hobby alive and well, I do think we need to align with its emerging technologies. As a community, I have noticed that we often find ourselves stuck revisiting the same issues without pushing forward into new territory. Two transformative developments on the horizon are lunar and Martian colonization and quantum computing. I think it's very important to start thinking of how amateur radio can support these missions, whether through communication systems, research, or innovation. And the same thing for quantum computing. We could initiate forums to explore how amateur radio can intersect with this field, from leveraging quantum technologies to supporting hardware and application development. So that's probably it for me. But I think it's always important to keep an open mind in this hobby because, like I said, it's static. There's things that are always changing. How can we help the rest of our community?
McKenzie, I really appreciate you joining me today. You certainly are a bright light, not only in ham radio, but I'm sure you're going to hit medicine the same way. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
I've been talking to McKenzie Denton, KO4GLN. She's at Old Dominion University. You may hear her on the club station or maybe in a contest in the future, or maybe when you do that ER visit somewhere in Virginia, you may meet Dr. Denton. McKenzie, thanks again.
Thank you so much.